So where exactly do the peace talks with the Taliban stand as of now? As of today, they are going nowhere. Afghan Taliban called off talks with the US a day before the two-day talks were to begin. Taliban said that the talks that were to be held in Qatar stand cancelled due to quote-unquote agenda disagreement. Taliban said they will not hold talks with what they called puppet Afghan officials. Taliban rejected several requests from regional powers to allow Afghan officials to take part in the talks. Taliban maintains that America is their main adversary and that Kabul is just a puppet regime. Now, this round of talks would have been the fourth in a series of negotiations held by US and Taliban. Pakistan and Iran have also been trying to persuade the Taliban to get Afghanistan on the negotiating table, but all efforts have failed so far. Russia has held a multilateral dialogue with the Taliban. In a first, India participated, though not officially. The government sent two former diplomats to Moscow as observers. Delhi did not issue any statements, but that presence was a statement in itself. India was willing to see the Taliban as a party. Let's get in further perspectives at this point from Ambassador Arun Singh, former Indian ambassador to the United States, joining us from New Delhi. Ambassador, let's begin by asking you what you make of those remarks made by the Indian Army chief.
From what I understand, this comment that was made was in the context of a panel discussion that was taking place at an international conference in Delhi and in response to a question. And it talks about there should be negotiations with the Taliban, but without conditions. Now, it is the Taliban really who have been putting conditions at this stage, saying that they will not talk to the Afghan government and that if they talk to the US, they'll be talking only about first US withdrawal from Afghanistan before they look at anything else. Now, at one level, given the situation on the ground, where the Taliban continue to have a presence, continue to have influence, they have been sheltered, provided safe haven, trained, equipped by Pakistan. Different countries, including Russia, Iran, who had earlier opposed the Taliban, have reached out and established contact with the Taliban. The Afghan government has also said that they're ready to talk to the Taliban. And from time to time, they have declared ceasefire in order to prevent the violence that is taking place. US government for quite some time has now been trying to withdraw its troops from Afghanistan because I think they have realized that in terms of the kind of resources and political and other commitment that they can bring to the ground, they have perhaps reached the zenith of what they can achieve. And they want to find a way to bring about some settlement and take their forces out of Afghanistan. So they've also been talking to the Taliban for some time. So given that, it's just a fact on the ground that everyone is talking to the Taliban. But from what I understand, the Indian position to be is that essentially it has to be an inter-Afghan process. The process has to be led by the Afghans, by the Afghan government. The discussions, negotiations have to be between the Afghan government and the opposition, be it the Taliban and whatever. And whatever emerges from that process has to be an inclusive process, that it should not lead to a Taliban or a Pashtun domination over the rest of Afghanistan, but an inclusive process so that other communities feel included in this.
So, as far as the Afghan peace talk process is concerned, should India, according to you, play a larger role at this point?
My understanding is that India has placed itself fully behind the Afghan government. And like the Afghan government, India has been saying that any kind of a process of peace, reconciliation should be an Afghan-led process. So that is the approach India has been taking. Some of the other countries, Russia, Iran, have said that they have reached out to the Taliban for their own interest because they believe that there are groups in Afghanistan who are targeting in terms of terrorism. The US has reached out to the Taliban because it wants to promote reconciliation. Because within the United States now, after almost 18 years of involvement in Afghanistan, the political mood is in favor of not sustaining this process. And the US government has to deal with that challenge. And the only way they can sustain some kind of a political support for what they are doing is by projecting that they're doing something towards reconciliation so that they can try and move out. So they need that for themselves. So let them make that effort. And I think from India's perspective, while all that is going on, by standing fully behind the Afghan government and supporting them and trying to strengthen them as they carry out their negotiations, is, I believe, at this stage, perhaps the most effective way to advance this process.
All right, we're going to leave it there for the moment, Ambassador. Appreciate very much all of those perspectives coming in there. As far as the peace process goes, in a related development though, Iran, as Ambassador was just mentioning, which has been in talks with the Taliban, has offered its assistance to India to wield influence over the Taliban. Iran has said that they are willing to help India engage with the Taliban if India wishes to mediate. Iran's foreign minister is in India and is meeting the Indian leadership. At such a time, the offer from Iran to India elucidates Tehran's connections with the Taliban. Iran said that they have considerable influence, quote unquote, over the Taliban, and they have used it for the Afghan government in the past. They added that they were more than happy to do the same for India if New Delhi showed the willingness. Iran's connections with the Taliban are exemplified with the fact that they recently, an Iranian delegation, in fact, met with the Taliban in Tehran. India and Iran are engaged in aspects of security and fighting terrorism. There are several areas bordering Iran that are under Taliban control, and that is why it is imperative for Tehran to engage with them. There has been no official response from the Indian government on the offer made by Iran so far, but it is likely to turn it down. Remember, India has not sent any official delegation to the peace talks being held between America and the Taliban. This development is significant because the US plans to withdraw around half of its troops from Afghanistan. Given these circumstances, it is possible that the Taliban will come to power in some form in Kabul, and hence engaging with them is of utmost importance at the moment.